Hello and welcome to Fantasy View, a podcast about reviews for fantasy novels, because I've read a whole hell of a lot and I want to give you my recommendations on what to read, what to skip, and what to burn. But only after you first buy it, of course. I'm Jason Hubbard. In my first episode here, I took a look at a title by one Lucas Thorne called Revenge of the Elf, which is part one of a series called Nysta, which is simply the name of the main character. As soon as I finished reading that, I got the second one in this series on my Kindle. But it was only until now when my lazy ass finally got around to reading it. And so, here's my review. My opinion on this book is that it's good. Okay, can I get around to playing Majora's Mask now? No! Well, damn it, okay. I guess I got more to say. Okay, so what happened in the first book is that the main character, Nysta, well, her husband was murdered by a group of bandits called the Bloody Nine. Nysta discovered the body when she returned home to their cabin while sporting a hangover because she just came back from a tavern. She buried the body, stayed the night in the cabin, and then the next morning she vowed revenge as she followed the trail of hoof prints by the Bloody Nine's horses, meaning to eliminate every single damn one of them. Along the way, she quickly meets a mage named Chuck Sheen. Chuck Sheen. And I may have misspelled his name in the last episode. If you noticed, please do not send me a letter full of glitter, okay? I don't want to have to open a letter and get glitter all over myself, and then I have to go to work looking like that, and I have to convince all of my coworkers that, no, I was not trying to pretty myself up for all the customers. Thank you. Well, anywho, Nysta can be a pretty colorful character, but I guarantee you her partner Chuck Sheen has her beat. I say this because the things that come out of his mouth, I tell you. Because for one thing, he's a womanizer, okay? He claims that he has a wife, some children, maybe even more than one wife. And he said that there was once a girl who once let him put his hands on her boobs. So, I don't know, that was like a magic moment for him, and so he just had to say something about it. And I'm just scraping the surface here, truly. I said that the story was like something that Quentin Tarantino might adapt into a movie. Not just because of the foul language, but because of all the bloody violence that goes on. I believe the author was inspired by the likes of Conan the Barbarian, and in those kinds of stories, Conan is technically the hero. Well, he's more like an anti-hero because he's not afraid to kill people left and right. Well, I said that the first book was very much like a standard revenge tale in a fantasy world. Reading the sequel reminded me that there's not just the revenge story going on, there's a lot of world building as well. There are apparently 3 gods, or at least there were 3 gods, and they're warring against each other. Each one has raised massive armies, and they're pitting their armies against each other. Each army is working to expand to as much land as they can, and fighting for the ideals that their gods uphold. And the fact that Nysta and each of the members of the Bloody Nine are elves becomes a plot point, a source of motivation. And apparently there's a rich history that Nysta and Chuck Sheen just happened upon when they're holding themselves up inside this fortress, believing that some members of the Bloody Nine are in there as well. Of course, all this world building really just serves as an excuse for Nysta to kill a whole bunch of mother lovers. Because, as I said, the author was inspired by the likes of Conan the Barbarian. Stories in which our main hero just rips into a whole bunch of faceless mother lovers. Totally guilt-free, it's not quite like ripping into zombies, but close. And another thing that I was reminded of when I read this sequel is that the author apparently loves puns. His love of puns is channeled through his main character, Nysta, who usually closes out a chapter with a pun. Now, in the first book, Nysta had said some puns, and I understood them, but I understood the joke, but I just thought they were a little weird, and they just came out right out of the blue. Well, apparently the author didn't think so. he didn't think that the puns were, kind of weird and somehow inappropriate, because in this sequel, there are even more puns. And by the way, just in case you don't know what a pun is, I got it right here in my Webster's dictionary. A pun is the humorous use of a word or of different words sounded alike so as to play on the various meanings. I hear that the Japanese people in particular really love their puns, so Mr. Lucas Thorne, are you secretly Japanese? Well, I'm not going to give out any examples of these puns, but I will say that at least 2 of these puns play on pop culture. Maybe 3 of them. So I challenge you, dear listener, to, read this book and check out the puns and see what I mean. Try and catch the references on your own. Oh, and I will say this. The author is apparently a Pink Floyd fan. I had a college roommate who was a Pink Floyd fan. Good times. So what else can I say? Well, this so-called duel at Grimwood Creek seemed like something that was a long time in coming. Something that could have happened at the end of the first book. Which, made me think when I was in the middle of the sequel that the first book and the second book could have been joined as one and just sold as one volume. And indeed, the author admits at the very end in his author's note that Part 1 and Part 2 were originally just one book. He decided to separate them because he wanted to release books on a fairly regular basis. He also ended up believing that 600 pages was a little too long, and that readers prefer to have shorter volumes, so-called cheap thrills. Now, personally, I don't really condone this decision, nor do I condemn it. It's just a business decision, and if it worked out well for him, then, all the more power to him. Well, overall, this story is well-paced and fun. It has a satisfying ending, and yet it also sets itself up for the next installment in the series, which I'll definitely get to someday. However, I do have one major knock against this book, and actually it's not just against this book, it's against the author's writing style, and that is, he depends a little too much on sentence fragments. A sentence is supposed to have a subject and a predicate, an object followed by a verb that the object is doing. If you have either just a subject or a predicate alone, you have a sentence fragment. Now, of course, this doesn't happen all the time. The author doesn't do it so many times that it makes the book virtually unreadable. But even so, it happens just occasionally, and I just can't help but nag about it. There are at least 2 instances in which the author attempts to put a sentence fragment, just some additional information, right in the middle of a sentence. Now, I believe authors do this all the time. I do that myself sometimes. And how they do that is they use hyphens or parentheses. But this author did not end up using either of those. He just ended up making 3 different sentence fragments, which, it sounded good in his head, and it may sound good when you say it aloud, but yet it doesn't look good on paper. And if such information doesn't look good on paper, then it may just end up confusing the reader. Good punctuation is used to not confuse the reader. So what can I say? The author, if he likes puns well enough, that's fine by me, but he should learn to embrace the hyphen and the parenthesis. He should maybe leave his wife and put a ring on the hyphen and the parenthesis, and the world will be a better place. And Nysta might, kiss him as well as kill him. And so that's pretty much it. The book is called The Duel at Grimwood Creek, the part 2 of the Nysta series by Lucas Thorne. It's a bloody good time. It's got lots of violence, well-paced action scenes, let me tell you, and a lot of foul language. So, if you're very sensitive about things like that, then maybe you should skip this. Otherwise, definitely get it. I mean, if you like Red Sonja, forget her. I saw the movie, it sucked. I should also give props to some of the magic spells that Chuck Sheen casts, because, they're all summoning spells, but they're pretty damn sick. I myself wrote a book where the main character casts some pretty risque magic spells, but they're not nearly as risque as some of the summoning spells that Chuck Sheen casts. And so that wraps up another episode of Fantasy View. Next time I will try to tackle an entire trilogy. Thank you for listening, and please keep reading.